All right. Good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
This is our March meeting of the Rail and Transit Subcommittee for CTB. We have a number of things on the agenda today. I guess as an update, I think you all know that this is my last subcommittee and board meeting. I will be leaving DRPT as of Friday. Jen DeGrol will be taking over as director. So very, very excited that Jen will be taking on this role.
We'll miss you, and we're all holding back. I am, and I'm holding back tears right now. But and knowing that you're going to FRA and will still kind of be in our orbit is a wonderful thing. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Congratulations.
I will not be going far.
Well,
Yeah.
And we'll miss you.
Yeah, I'll miss you guys too. Yeah. But like I said, I won't be going far, so I'm sure I will still have the ability to work with Virginia in a lot of different contexts.
We certainly hope so.
Yeah, and certainly on implementation of the new infrastructure.
Yeah.
So,
I hate to say how perfect, but in some respects, it's just a great place for you to go. Thank you.
thank you. So with that, I'd like to go ahead and ask for approval of the minutes.
Second.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Okay, that is approved. We have a few things on the agenda today. Most importantly, I'm very excited to hear from Randy Marcus today from CSX. This is in response to some of the conversations we had earlier about getting some more understanding from the freight railroads about their business developments and issues and how the Commonwealth can work with them. We expect that in the future we'll have other representatives from Norfolk Southern and the short line railroads as well to also provide us with some more insight about what they are doing. So with that, I am actually going to go ahead and let's see, I think. But just a couple updates real quick. First of all, we are going to host a joint industry day on Monday, the 21st. That's going to be for both DRPT and VPRA to have some outreach to the consultant and engineering community, private sector community, to learn some more about how they can interact and work with DRPT and VPRA in the future. So very excited about that. We also had a new rail planning analyst join us on March 10th, Katie Miller. Oh, there's me. Yes, exactly. So we're continuing to add to the staff. So very excited about that. We are currently working on the Roanoke and Clifton Forge multimodal connection study. That was something that was required of us by the General Assembly to look at better connections from Roanoke to Clifton Forge to connect with the Cardinal Line. And that is currently expected to be to the General Assembly by June 30th. And then we are still working on, I think I've reported to you all about our MOA that was looking at revisions to DCRVA, particularly our Section 106 analysis for the Chaco Valley area here in Richmond. We expect to target the completion of that MOA in mid to late April. So I think that's all. We did have, as I'm sure Mr. Spoot knows, a number of public meetings for our new River Valley Passenger Station feasibility analysis. Had over 200 people participate in those meetings, and we expect to. We still have public comments underway until March, so I expect that that's going to be done pretty quickly. So, and that's primarily it. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and move on into the agenda. Oh, questions?
Could we possibly get Katie to give us a brief introduction on her background and experience?
So I'm Katie Miller, the new rail planning analyst. I am joining most recently from the Department of Housing and Community Development, where I was a capacity building program coordinator, so a lot of grants management and community outreach experience. I'm currently pursuing my master's in urban and regional planning at VCU, and then my undergrad at UVA in environmental sustainability and urban planning.
Great.
Yeah.
Good to have you aboard.
Thank you.
Yes, great.
Jennifer, give us a quick update on the anticipated return to service dates of some of the trains that have been held in abeyance the last several months.
Sure. So I may also defer to Mike on this one, but I know that right now Amtrak is targeting late June for both the beginning of the 3rd Norfolk train, the 2nd Roanoke train, and the reintroduction of the Newport News train. So they would, at this point, a lot of it is because of workforce issues. They're planning to reintroduce all of those introduce and reintroduce all of those at the same time. So they're looking at June 27th. They've said it might be a little bit later, but that is the plan right now. I don't know.
That's accurate. One thing to keep, so the Newport News train that now serves gangs to 100%. Start in June. The Roanoke train can't start before the close of the definitive agreements with Norfolk Southern, which are expected around that time, but it could be given take a couple.
No, it's going to be by then.
Good work.
And again, the third Roanoke train, which is part of a couple different deals with CSX. We'll hopefully get started as well. So hopefully we'll have some ceremonial rides in the summer.
And what about the silver service?
The long distance service?
Yeah.
That remains to be determined. They're actually trying to prioritize some Virginia service. And that could come at the expense of some other service. But we've been hard to find out the importance of our service, and that we want to show that Virginia and Amtrak do have a good relationship, especially with the commitment both of us are making to transform the railroad.
Any other questions for me? Okay, so with that, I'm going to ask Randy Marcus to come join us. And
thank you, Jennifer. I am Randy Marcus. I am in charge of state and government local relations for CSX for Virginia, West Virginia, and DC. It's a pretty diverse political environment between the three different states, but Virginia is by far my favorite. It's my home. I spent, before coming to CSX, I spent 10 years in the governor's office, working for Governor McAuliffe, Governor McDonald. I was in Governor Bowling. Before that, I was a campaign hack. Realized that, I wasn't any good at that. I needed a more stable, job. But so I want to talk a little bit about what's going on with CSX in Virginia generally. Talk about how we've interacted with some of the good programs. Then, have an opportunity for you guys to ask me questions, so I can kind of talk about what you guys would like to hear about. Real quick, just some top line stuff on CSX here. We have about 700 employees in Virginia, about 2,000 track miles. We have major yards in Richmond, Petersburg, Newport News, Fredericksburg, and Clifton Forge. Our customers are a wide range. Obviously, Port Virginia is our largest customer in Virginia, but we serve customers of everything from recycling to aggregates to candy to which we'll be hearing about later today, to coal and grain. And we're for us, we do about 750,000 cars through Virginia each year. A fair amount of that is throughput. Our network runs from Portsmouth to Rocky Mount, North Carolina, connects up on 95 and runs up to DC, essentially. We have a track around Richmond, and then we kind of run along the James River from Newport News to Clifton Forge, essentially. We have about 20 miles that comes south down from Winchester down, and then a line of Southwest Virginia that mostly throughput. So we want to move as much as we possibly can in Virginia, but like I said, a lot of that is kind of is stuff that's on our I-95 corridor. So the programs that Virginia has, I know that we talked about this a lot, whether it was the IPROC and now the Commonwealth Rail Fund, or the REF, the freight program, or the RIA, they're really the model for the country. I know that my colleagues in other states, where they're trying to establish new programs, they always ask, that I'm always sitting in the information on what we're doing and here and why that's beneficial. The reason why we were able to accomplish the Transforming Rail in Virginia stuff was because you had these established programs, you had dedicated funding, you had an ongoing relationship with us that's been beneficial and fruitful, and there was trust on both sides to be able to get these things done. For us, separation of passenger and freight rail, which will ultimately come and incrementally get to that point, will be a huge benefit for us moving freight, particularly from the Port of Virginia, but also along this corridor. Right now, we often have trains that hold in Richmond during most of the rush hour days until they can get a window to go up to DC. In the future, we'll be able to run more scheduled, more predictable service and increase volumes to support the growth and support other customers here in Virginia and elsewhere. Also want to speak to the benefits of the REF and now the freight program. That was a huge part for us, the National Gateway double stacked service that we were able to provide to the port, and then Norfolk Southern use that as well was super, was a tremendous benefit. That having a program that provides flexibility. I mean, the state funds here allowed us to double stack and clear the Virginia Avenue Tunnel in DC. I mean, having a program with the flexibility and frankly the vision to see that, okay, this project here is going to be a tremendous benefit to our citizens in Virginia. Just to give you a sense of what the National Gateway and Virginia Avenue Tunnel project does for us, we move an average of 1 million truck miles off local highways through the DC region because we're able to double stack that through there. So, but these programs are also beneficial for smaller projects. There was a project in Branchville, which is on our Portsmouth sub. Purdue wanted to, increase export from the port, so we were able to create a dedicated service for them that needed a larger site. That was a $2 million project, not a $20 million project. And so having the flexibility and resources to be able to do those things is a tremendous benefit for that program. But it is one of the things that we think about as the changes are going on over the last year or two, having the new agency is to make sure that there are still resources here for these projects to benefit freight. But a lot of ours are, they're not every year. It's like maybe we go 3 or 4 years without having one, and just to make sure that we don't lose the kind of the support for the program because there may not be a major project every year. Rail and Industrial Access Fund, you guys have a project that you'll be talking about here shortly. Mondelez and Eastern Rico. We'll be making, I think it's the expedited Oreo cookie manufacturing, which we're very excited about. But it shows you why this is such a good program. Is the Mondelez deal was a big deal announced by Governor Northam. Huge investment, bunch of jobs, but they were able to add rail access through this program. It isn't huge, but it's important to be able to expand its capacity. There are also a number of other projects. I'm not sure where this is in the process, but in Henrico County, there's a recycling company that was also, it's not like it's not thousands of cars like you may see at a Mondelez, but it's a smaller company to be able to help them have more rail access as well. And the reason why that's important, double the stats, we can move 1 ton of freight 532 miles on a gallon of fuel. We're 75% lower GHG emissions compared to trucks. And for every rail car on average, moves 4 trucks off the highways. I know you guys all know that, but if I don't say it, then I get in trouble.
Is that 532 number increasing?
Yes, it is.
I thought it had.
Yeah,
because it was in the force not too long ago.
Yeah, it's gotten higher every year. A lot of that is better technology with the locomotives, better understanding of how we use our fuel. How they weight the trains and stuff like that is all something that we think about every day. It's good for the environment, it's good for our bottom line. That's kind of a couple of the things I want to touch on with the existing programs. I know everybody's excited with the IIJA money coming down. From the freight rail perspective, there are a couple of things that are really important to us and we want to keep in people's minds. There's a rail crossing elimination program, which is the first time that they've ever had one. Ever had a program dedicated to grade separations and crossing closures. So, as we move more and more freight, we occasionally have more impacts to the community, whether you hear about block crossings or things like that. This is an opportunity to be able to close down some crossings where you provide other access. Coming through, I mean, we have a couple that are really got smaller niche, like impacts, but Port of Virginia wants to increase the amount of rail transport, of rail containers moved there. You're going to have a lot more impacts in places like Portsmouth and Suffolk. That if you don't have the political support to do these things, people look more challenging. So just wanted to say that those are a couple things that are important to us. That are kind of less of the kind of sexy top line stuff that you see out there with the bill. And then something else that the governor was talking about that is really important to us is these mega sites. One of the biggest challenges we have on kind of major new rail customers is often that's when there's a major new manufacturer. And Virginia, historically, best state for business, but it's kind of rests on the laurels, particularly on the manufacturer side of that every time. We just don't have a lot of the ready-made sites to go to be able to bring in whether it's car manufacturer, steel manufacturer, from West Virginia, they just got a $2.2 billion investment from Nucor, which is the largest, project they've ever had. You've had there was 3 or 4 different car manufacturers that went to Georgia, Tennessee, Kentucky that we didn't really have a shot at. Now we're not going to get car manufacturing, but we got to have the inventory of sites. The governor and our legislature push hard about getting more money for these things. They're expensive and they take time, but they're important for us to be able to move more freight. So that's kind of my quick run through of things that I'm thinking about as it relates to the programs here. But I'm going to hear what questions you guys may have about what we're doing. And
Scott?
So you mentioned the total throughput freight cars in CSX through the Commonwealth. Do you know the originating number?
I did not, but not off the top of my head.
That's really the important number to us just for future discussions.
Yeah.
And one of the things we've strived to do through our programs, and of course you mentioned some of them, is to facilitate new businesses that are locating near or on track to expand their use of rail.
That my guess would be that it would be maybe a third.
That'd be great information.
Yeah.
That'd be helpful.
Yeah.
We talk a lot about the future of railroading in here and how it impacts us from a transportation planning perspective. Can you give us a vision? And of course, it's kind of quiet news, but there's just revolutionary change going on in your industry, not just with CSX, but with all railroads. A lot of technology, a lot of innovation, a lot of changes, job reductions, track mileage reduction. Can you give us a picture of what the CSX will do in 10 years or what your management wants to do in 10 years?
So you talked about technology, innovation, and that's something where we see as a huge opportunity for growth. Obviously, with the positive train control that we've implemented over the previous 10 years or even longer, gives us a lot more ability to operate trains autonomously and be able to use the fact that we're on a fixed network with fixed communication systems controlling our trains to be able to run them more safely, run them more efficiently, and ultimately our competitors are not really Norfolk Southern or the short lines; they're the trucking industry.
We understand that.
And then when the trucking industry is going towards automated trucking, truck platooning, for us to remain competitive, we need to be able to take advantage of innovation and those types of technologies. Whether it's automation in our yards, whether it is using ultrasound or radar to detect track flaws and stuff like that.
So I guess that automation trend is affecting the whole industry. We understand you guys are part of that. I think I'm more interested in understanding what CSX's plans are, especially for originating traffic, for building more business in the Commonwealth. And maybe you can compare that and talk about your current capacity versus where you see that going in the next 10 years. Will you become more focused on online business? Will you be more focused on through traffic business in the Commonwealth? Give us a picture of what management sees as the opportunity in Virginia in the coming years.
The biggest opportunity for us in the coming years is at the port. I mean, and that's that's right now. We right now we have we do about a quarter of the traffic that comes through the port. As if we're able to work
Quarter of all traffic.
Quarter of all rail traffic.
All rail traffic. So your competitor does 3/4.
There are access issues that we're working through, and we're hopeful to have some resolution on there. For us to be able to serve in IT on dock would be tremendous. That would be a huge opportunity for us to increase originations here. We want to be able to, run a effective, efficient, safe service that is more truck-like. And we've gone through some operational challenges over the last couple years, everyone has. And we think that the more that we can run a better service, then we can have the opportunity to compete on some more of these, truck competitive routes. Broadly, we want to continue to embrace innovation and technology where we can. Specifically in Virginia, what kind of those target areas are. We think for us, where there is more business to be had is kind of in the area south of Richmond, along our line there, to about Petersburg, down in Emporia. There's a couple large sites there, and then on the Portsmouth line, whether it's warehousing or some of the other areas, we think we have some opportunities there. So that's kind of where we see the business of Virginia going. And then with the separation on the RFP, there could be an opportunity where we haven't really had an opportunity between Richmond and DC, really Richmond, Fredericksburg.
Actually, Mr. Merrill had a question.
Yeah, anything on the inland port? Any comments on the inland port up in Front Royal?
That's on Norfolk Southern. We think that it's great for them. I think that's it is a huge benefit for the state. That's not. Yes, sir.
Yeah, following Scott's comment,
Yeah.
looking at the 10-year program, what are the major impediments that you see that we might think about focusing on from a policy standpoint to help get you and the rail industry up and running further? And does your activity impact what's happening with the new proposed tunnel under the Hudson River?
No, we're not related to the Hudson River tunnel. Really for us, it's being able to, from the state policy side, a couple things that are important is to be able to make sure that you have a balanced regulatory environment so we can't compete with trucks. As there are, more moving towards automation, platooning, heavier truck stuff like that makes it tougher for us to compete. It's harder for us to provide value proposition. Being able to, in some circumstances, have less than 2 people in the cab of a locomotive. That's really more of a federal issue, but they go to the state, go to the state issue now and again. And then, making sure that as these, that there maintains flexibility and resources in these existing programs to be able to support when there are new infrastructure projects needed. For example, you met this, but when the Port of Virginia did the Gamesa wind turbine project at PMT, they leased our Portsmouth intermodal yard from us. So we don't have that spot there anymore. We have enough capacity at VIG to be able to continue to serve our customers there. But let's say, for example, that when we got to practice, we didn't. Being able to have the flexibility to pivot, and whether it's to add more storage tracks on site or otherwise, to be able to have that flexibility with the programs. I can foresee where if you go 2, 3, 4, 5 years without having some large projects, the resources in those funds can go elsewhere. But yes, that's that is government focus, and so which is what the perspective that I'm coming from. We may have some different things like our commercial. That's our thought.
Something that we learned the hard way, which usually is through experience, is the maintenance of right-of-way is really important.
Mhm.
And transportation does not do well when right-of-way maintenance does not do well. I'm thinking primarily about the snowstorm we had to close a number of our highways, including major arteries, in early January.
Yeah.
You all had some of this, all railroads had some of the same experience.
Yeah.
Particularly on the Richmond, Northern Virginia.
Yeah.
And even as we speak today, there are crews out across the Commonwealth on the highways
Oh, yeah.
addressing that. I'd like to hear that the railroads are doing the same. Is that right or not?
I mean, obviously, we had like on our track, we had 700 trees down, which, for us is a lot
Yeah, it's a lot.
to move. Now, trains win more train versus tree fights than cars do, but we still got to get them all off the road. And there's a whole lot of infrastructure that we need to protect. As far as whether we're going through and identifying, I know on 64, whenever I drive to West Virginia, I see the
You see it?
yeah, I see it.
So I guess
I'm not aware of what we're doing as far as, trying to get ahead of taking down trees that may be in the way, but I can look into that.
I hope you will,
Yeah.
because I have a friend who's on the Port Authority board.
Yeah,
And the problems that railroads had with trees back in January.
Yeah.
Basically shut that thing down for 2 or 3 days.
oh, yeah, no, yeah, it's an every fight every couple days. Some of it is, hey, once in a, 100 years event, we have these once in 100 year events every 5 years now.
Yeah, exactly. Big gun.
And that, obviously that did clear out some of the trees that were weakest, but I don't want it to be out of turn, so let me see what we've got going on. Great point though.
Right.
I'm going to go back to the areas of opportunity that
Yeah.
you kind of talked about, and just ask what the process is or how CSS thinks about those places. I mean, we've had conversation here about trying to get ahead of not being so reactive to
Yeah.
a request, and now the governor's saying, ready sites. What's CSX's role in saying this would be a great place, for us to have a new siting and for businesses to locate?
So, it's kind of two things there. One, we do have, and our colleagues on the other railroads as well, they have CSX select sites, which are, ready to go rail serve sites. That the Maymac site in Emporia is one of those. I think there may be one or two more in Virginia. So when a customer comes to us and they're looking to expand, then, we have this readily available, search on the internet, like you're searching for Zillow, same type of thing. That's one way that we try to be proactive. Because a lot of times, we're kind of wagging the tail of the dog here, and that might be a good analogy, right? But like we're brought into a process with VEDP when they have a prospect, or we're brought into the process when the local government has a prospect, and we get in to figure out, okay, how would we design this facility? How can we connect rail? And what the costs are? So really, most of the time, it's kind of us being brought into a process that's already going on through the professional economic development. But we do have CSX select sites, which is a bit of a tongue twister for me, but that we can market those internally. I know over Southern other rails.
Jennifer, it might be really useful for us to see that, as well as the places that VEDP is targeting to be ready sites. As we think about flow on the network, this is just, I just think the more we're ready and the more we understand the geography, because I guess the other side of that sometimes is, the rail gets it to the place and then a chunk of it does leave on trucks. And so then it lets us understand better that whole truckload issue on the roads that are then near that location.
Sure, and I know that Emily and her team do work with VEDP on a number of things that may actually be a good subject for a future presentation, as well as from VEDP about how CTB and transportation can support some of the work that they're doing.
Yeah, I mean, I think for us, truck traffic just looks like a huge challenge moving forward. And so we want all this business to come here, but we have to figure it out from a logistical point of view.
And we work closely with DEP, and they have all of our updated. We have every few months to make sure they have current what's our rail service sites, which is available. So
It would be a good map in the rail plan, actually.
Anyone else?
Anything else?
And I do just want to also second Randy's comment earlier about the new program being created for grade crossings, as well as there's been a lot of talk about the federal funds that will be available for passenger rail projects. But there is actually this substantial new program that I think DRBT and our railroads working together can all, and VDOT, obviously, look for opportunities for ways to help alleviate some of those grade crossings, crossing issues.
And there's also more money going into the Section 130 program. So
Yes.
there'll be a whole lot of opportunities to improve some of the, least safe, will make crossing safer, and they look for ways to separate, which will help move the flow of goods and people, and reduce the stress for people that have occasional block crossings.
Yeah, and Section 130 is actually a FHWA program that is currently administered by VDOT, but we work with them as well in the no trouble spots. But I think this area of grade crossings and eliminating grade crossings has just a huge both operational and safety benefit.
So,
Especially with 2 mile trains.
Yes, yes,
Yeah.
exactly.
May I ask one more question?
Yeah.
Yeah, of course.
Randy, can you tell us in CSX use where we have capacity constraints from a freight perspective in your current 2,000 mile system in Virginia? And then second, where you guys are focusing your capital efforts to improve throughput and the constraints?
Really, from our side on the capacity constraints, it's really Richmond and North, where the passenger.
So that's your.
Sure, yeah, that's our focus there.
But that's mostly for port traffic, that.
It's the whole, where we have the Amtrak and VRE is where we have capacity constraints, which we're working on through the RFP, transport and rail stuff. And that's port to port, that supports all of our north-south traffic. That our capital program for the rest of our is almost primarily maintenance.
Okay, so is it safe to say then that, with the exception of the situation you just cited, that you don't have significant capacity constraints within the Commonwealth?
Not in Virginia at this moment.
Okay, so that speaks to me as additional capacity to take on more freight.
Yeah, we can, for the most part, that we can move. And once there could be some things down at the port, once we get the access stuff resolved, there could be some one-off things. And that's why it kind of speaks to the flexibility, and that if we don't do something for 3 or 4 years, there could be something that comes up. But we spend we spend about 18-20% of our total revenue of almost $2 billion on maintenance, and that's almost everything that we do here in Virginia.
So I guess the takeaway for us is, I don't want to say unconstrained, but significant additional capacity within the Commonwealth. Second part of that is you touched on technology, and just from the miscellaneous reading I do, expectations are in the next 10 years that could add to existing track 20 to 30% additional capacity based on the more precise handling of trains. So that would also add to that. Really,
it's for us, it's the places where we have the opportunity to host passenger rail is where there's a little bit more capacity constraints and time of day and something like that.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
All right, anyone else? Great, thank you so much,
Awesome.
Randy.
Thanks.
Appreciate you being here.
With you guys.
All right. So next on the agenda rule is going to give us an update on our transit capital applications. Again, this was in preparation of, as you know, April is the big meeting where we roll out the recommendations for the 6-year plan. So that's going to give an update on the transit applications that we've received in preparation for that.
So this is really going to build on the conversation we had back in February, where I told you a lot about other things and not as much about capital. So today I'm going to focus on capital. Just want to remind everybody, we have a very well-documented prioritization process that's been in place since 2019. And the allocations that the board made for fiscal year 20, it is built off of basically it's primarily a state repair program. With some opportunities for minor enhancement and support some major expansion projects. The process that we established back then worked really well. We just kicked off the effort to reevaluate that, as we're required to do by CTB policy. So just wanted to start off and say we're continuing to follow that same path. So you'll see me walk through 3 different types of projects today. We did get everything scored. I know I hedged a little bit last month, but we did get everything scored, so you will get a sneak preview. So I'm going to start off with state of good repair. And like I mentioned, this is, upwards of 75, 80% of our program that's on state of good repair. We evaluate each one of those projects and provided an asset condition score, which is 60% of their score, and then the other 40% of their score is based on service impact. So that's looking at the impact that that asset has on operations, on reliability of the system, customer experience, and safety, to give each individual asset that's applied for a technical score. So for this cycle, we scored 321 state of good repair items. I would say this is a typical year. Last year was above average. This year has been more typical. Our scores ranged from a high of 96 to a low of 15. I'll also emphasize that the quality of the applications that we're receiving from the transit agencies has increased significantly over the last year. So I think what we are seeing now is we are seeing agencies apply for the things that score well and do well through the prioritization. And some of those things that were not necessarily a state priority or not a good fit for our capital program, we don't see as many applications for that. What we have recommended for funding in the program that you will see next month is primarily going to be vehicle replacements and rehabilitations. We do have some hardware and software replacements where we're able to document that those assets are past their useful life. And we also have technology projects, facility projects, bus stop improvements. So it's a pretty typical package of state of good repair projects. One policy item that we're looking at in making our recommendation is typically we fund vehicle replacements when those assets are at 95% of their useful life. And in a typical scenario, it takes a transit agency about 12 to 18 months for that replacement vehicle to be ordered and arrive on site. What we have seen over the past 2 years is the period of time that it takes for those assets to be manufactured and arrive on site is being impacted by supply chain. It's being impacted by the fact that we haven't had a state contract now for a year. So there's a backlog of vehicles to be ordered and a backlog within the industry of those vehicles to be delivered. So we're going to make a recommendation as part of this program to go a little deeper in the list and pick up vehicles that normally would end up being funded in the next year, to go ahead and fund them now so they can be ordered and get them in the pipeline so that we don't continue to lose time with state of good repair.
So Jen, what does it mean that we don't have a state contract?
This has been a journey. So we work with the Department of General Services to put out a state contract for all different types of vehicles for transit agencies. It's a real time savings, it's economy of scale. We ran into a problem a little over a year ago where there was a conflict between the state, some state law, particular to Tesla, and when Tesla came to the state related to dealers and manufacturers and such, that was in direct conflict with the federal procurement law for transit vehicles. So we got to a point where DGS said that they weren't comfortable not complying with the state law. FTA told us that we complied with the state law, we would not be able to use federal money. So that's called an impasse. So thankfully, we've worked through this General Assembly session. We have both the legislative fix that has made it through both houses. We have language in the biennial budget and also in the caboose budget. So as soon as the governor signs the caboose budget, we're ready to issue the new procurement for the buses. So it's very bureaucratic and very technical and on its way to.
So that's dependent upon the budget being.
We have the legislation, once it's signed by the governor, would go into effect July 1st. Being in the caboose budget, that budget goes into effect as soon as the governor signs it. So that's for the current biennium, not the next biennium. So if once the governor signs that, which we're hoping would happen sometime in the next month or so, once we get past the session, then we'll be able to go ahead and issue those contracts. Get them back on the street.
You mentioned that traditionally it was an 18-month lead time, but it's increasing. What is it now?
And that's a good question. And right now we are in the pipeline, but we're hearing that it's 2-3 years, depending on what type of vehicle. You've seen me stand in front of the board the last couple of months and ask for additional transfers and increased allocations because we're also seeing vehicle prices go up. The biggest pinch has been on some of the smaller vehicles, and those vehicles are going from a year to, in some cases, 2 and 3 years wait time on a vehicle that is only good for 4 years. So that is really problematic. These vehicles have a useful life of 12 to 14 years. So stretching that out a little bit longer is less impactful, but something we want to make sure that we get back in line and we don't fall further behind.
Jennifer, have you figured the maintenance, the increased maintenance costs on those vehicles that are, between the 75 and 80% and 95%? The particular aspect of maintenance cost on maintaining those in their later years?
The maintenance cost definitely goes up, and you will see in this year's program of projects, we're funding a number of midlife overhauls, probably more than we have before. And we had to bring, for some hybrid buses, we had to bring some battery replacements to the board a couple months ago because their vehicle replacements were also hung up in this contracting and industry issue related to those vehicles. So yes, it is concerning. The older those vehicles get, the less reliability we have, and when you're trying to get people back on transit as folks transition back to the workplace, that doesn't help us make that happen if they're not reliable.
Jen, I have just one other question on the vehicle replacements. Are you seeing any shift in fuel source in what people are asking for?
Very slowly. I mean, we've got a handful of agencies that I would put in the category of early adopters, particularly battery electric. But we are seeing, we tend to pick up maybe one agency a year, dipping their toe in that. We are looking at doing a statewide zero emission study, looking at, what does it take? And this is, some of the work is coming out of that HJ 542 Transit Equity Modernization Study of like, what does it take to go to an alternative fuel source? We want to look beyond electric. There's hydrogen fuel cell, there's other options. So we want to do a little deeper dive into that once we finish that study, particularly for our small urban and rural agencies that don't have as much technical capacity.
How about in between diesel to CNG rather than diesel to electric? Is that?
So we have some systems that run full CNG. Here in Richmond, GRTC, they operate on
Our buses are CNG.
So the NOx reductions in that are significant. And I know it's, kind of a placeholder, but we're talking about life cycles of 10 to 14 years. It still may be a valid approach to take. So
it's an infrastructure piece, whichever way you go, whether you go CNG, we have a rural system that runs propane. We have electric. Anytime you make a shift in fuel type, there's an infrastructure component to basically get yourself set up to do that. Richmond's facility was constructed to support CNG. Arlington's got a light maintenance facility that is focused on CNG.
Right, and the Metro Bus CNG facility is across the street, so.
So there's that. That's part of the complexity. It's not as straightforward as buying a bus that has a more significant upfront cost, but it's the infrastructure piece that supports it. And some of what we're hearing from some of our agencies already is some of the operational challenges that they had. The weather's cold, it's rain, the battery electric don't operate as well when they have to run heat because it doesn't last as long. And so there's a learning curve there that we're trying to work through, and we're trying to get that information out of those initial early adoption projects to help educate everybody else.
That would be a great future presentation, honestly, is what percentage of the fleets in various places are which, and what are the lessons learned coming out of that?
And maybe the benefits that we're getting and of course, emission reductions.
Yeah, exactly. To understand that a little bit better would be great too.
We can certainly do that. So moving on, next category is minor enhancement. These are typically small incremental increases in service level or in facilities. Because we're not replacing something, we just score these on that service impact score. So they're on a 40-point scale. For minor enhancement, we scored 119 line items. Again, that's a pretty typical year. Our scores range from a high of 38 to a low of 8. Again, better quality applications than what we've seen in the past.
It's a top score 40.
The top score is, top potential score is 40. So what we're recommending for funding in minor enhancement are things like our expansion vehicles. To your point about reliability and maintaining these assets, you also see a lot of maintenance equipment, parts, the kind of the back end to keep the systems running well. You see that funded out of the minor enhancement program. We do have some customer facility improvements, including bus stops and shelters. That was something we were initially not able to fund last year that I know was a real concern for the board. So we were able to go back and fund those last year, and we've funded another slate. We're recommending funding another slate this year. We've also got operations and technology funded in this, and there are no policy items. It's pretty straightforward in terms of making a recommendation. The last piece of the program is major expansion projects. These are, I won't call them a unicorn, but there's definitely a smaller number of these projects that we've run through this merit process. We do use the same factor areas as Smart Scale, but we use transit-specific measures. This year, we received 4 applications for major expansion funding. We scored 2 of those. I'm going to start with the 2 we did not score. We had 2 applications from Charlottesville Area Transit for projects that are good projects. They're just not quite ready for prime time yet. So what we have done is we've worked with them to go back and move some preliminary engineering and design work into the minor enhancement program to help them advance those projects, both of which would make good federal discretionary applications. So we're going to continue to work with them on those projects and continue to move those projects forward, but outside of our major expansion program. We did score 2 major expansion projects. Both of them were related to VRE. Both of them were requests for small amounts of money for very large projects. One being the Crystal City VRE station relocation, and then the other for the rolling stock. When we do calculate the scores for major expansion, we calculate an overall benefit score, and then we divide that by the cost that's being requested out of the Transit Capital Program. Benefit on these 2 projects, large benefit, very small amount of money that's being requested. These are the highest scores we have ever seen out there.
That's great.
The low number in the denominator helps with that. They're both very good projects. So those will also be moving forward in terms of recommendation.
Jen, did the Boston Metro Station come in? Not this, did we fund that already? Okay, thank you. Just I just couldn't remember where we were with it.
Those are our only 4. We are, and since I mentioned those 2 with federal discretionary, we'll be going to see Jennifer and have her hand out. We do no shame, we'll do that all the time.
We should have absolutely no. We want special treatment.
We also do that with MTA. So we are working on a slate of potential projects to apply for federal discretionary money and we were really excited yesterday that we got word that the Central Shenandoah Planning District Commission out in Stanton, we had worked with them, another project that wasn't ready for prime time in 22. We said, we'll work with you. We helped them with a federal discretionary application. You allocated the match to support their federal discretionary application back in January. We got word yesterday that they were successful and received all the federal funding that they requested. So that is the model for us going forward. And so we're looking to see how we leverage merit with those increased federal discretionary.
Jim, one quick question, going back to the state of good repair. When I look at the scoring, the operating efficiency gets 10 points in that. Tell me what's included. Is direct greenhouse gas emission reduction part of that, or is it pretty much a cost-based operating efficiency?
I think it is cost-based. I will have to go back and look at it. It has been a while since we looked at those measures. We're looking to see if there are more qualitative ways that we can measure those service impact scores as we go forward and look to kind of take the next evolution of the merit program.
So who identifies these percentages? Are these things we've internally created? Or are they legislatively?
All of those measures are part of CTB policy. So we work.
So these are things that we can work on in context of conversations we've had. We can make this more a program that not only provides state of good repair, but tends to create incentives for moving to more greenhouse gas efficient buses and transit vehicles.
So just as a reminder, by code, there's a Transit Service Delivery Advisory Committee, or TSDAC, that is a compilation of folks representing transit industry, local government, the RPT, that works to basically create this. So this is something we actually had our first meeting of 2022 with TSDAC on Friday.
Interesting.
And we are starting that conversation now to bring any revisions, potential revisions to the merit process to you no later than
But ultimately, this is our decision on how these numbers work out.
Ultimately, that recommendation comes out of TSDAC and will come to you.
So Jen, let me just offer one other thing. A TPB up in my neck of the woods is hard at work on greenhouse gas. And there's some significant work being done around goals for our region. And I can't believe that buses will not play a role in wherever they end up. So just to the extent, and Kate Mattice is involved in that, and so are some other folks. But I would just say, one of my hopes is that as we adjust here, that we're cognizant of what that adjustment is in Northern Virginia, where we have the vast majority of the activity, so that we're not at odds, that we're working as much as we can in the same, rowing the boat in the same direction, using the same metrics. So.
And inherently, the more people that we can get to use public transportation, we're reducing congestion, and we're.
So zero fare is going to be important as well. Zero emission, zero fare.
Sheriff, give us a little color about the availability of replacement vehicles. I mean, anyone who's going out to buy a car has found out that, question of number one, what can you get? Number two, when can you get it?
How much?
It's not tomorrow. What about all these replacement vehicles? Are they available in the marketplace, or is it just a backlog continuing to build up?
So for the big buses, they're basically made to order. So there's a line. You got to get your spot in line. And right now, with us not having a contract, we've lost our spot.
And the line is getting longer, not shorter.
Correct. And we have been in contact with manufacturers. We kept that line of communication open. A lot of other states have used our contract, so everybody wants us to come back online, and the manufacturers are eager to work with us. So I feel like once we get that contract back in place, we'll get our spot in line, but I do think it's going to take longer than what we've seen typically. Where we have the biggest problem with vehicles is for paratransit and our human service transportation agencies that use vehicles that are built on the same chassis as, for example, what Amazon drives around your neighborhood and drops off their packages. There's huge amounts of competition for those chassis. And so the amount of those chassis that are going to the manufacturers that build those vehicles for public transportation has been cut. I mean, it's a fraction of what it was 2 or 3 years ago. And that is, to me, that's the biggest pinch, because those vehicles only have a useful life of 4 to 7 years, depending on what type of vehicle it is. And so when you start saying that you're going to have to wait 2 or 3 years for a replacement vehicle, you're talking about running that vehicle almost twice as long as it was intended to. And that is going to be, I think, the most significant issue. In
So
terms of how
we're going to hit the wall.
I hope not. We've kept those contracts open. We've got staff going out next week to Lynchburg, to our vendors, to work with them on, making sure that we're in the right spot in line, being able to take some of these allocations back to the board, help offset cost increases has been critical, and keeping our place in line. So we're on top of it. We're staying on top of it, but it's definitely a challenge for the industry as a whole.
Okay. Thank you. And I just want to say again how excited I am that Jen will be sitting in the seat next month and will be as the acting director. I do also want to know that Grant Sparks in the back has just been named our acting chief of public transportation.
Oh, great.
As well.
So you'll see him present that to the board.
Exactly. Thank you. I'm going to use chair's prerogative here because we only have a couple minutes left. Mike Todd's presentation on the Real Industrial Access presentation, you're going to see in the workshop.
Yeah.
And so we're going to skip that, and also Emily's presentation on the rail plan. I apologize because we have a couple people signed up for public comment. And I want to make sure that.
Can we put rail plan first next month, then
Yes,
agenda girl, please?
yeah, exactly. I apologize. But hopefully you all had a chance to read the presentation, or will get a chance to read it as well. And Emily will give you an update on that too. So apologies for that. But we now have a couple people signed up for public comment. And first is Lisa. That's okay.
That's the right spot. Morning, I'm Lisa Guthrie.
Good morning.
I'm the Executive Director of the Virginia Transit Association. I'm here to shower some praise on our our key principles here today. I want to take a minute to share with you our gratitude for the service of DRPT Director Jennifer Mitchell during the past 8 years. So I especially want to acknowledge her hard work and achievements accomplished with Secretaries Lane and Valentine. Especially groundbreaking during this period of time was the 2020 Transportation Omnibus Bill that increased funding and streamlined the revenue allocations, the most significant reform in transit funding since Governor Bilal's administration in 1986. During her tenure, we also saw dedicated funding for WMATA, VRE, Northern Virginia, Central Virginia, and Hampton Roads Transit. There's also dedicated funding for zero fare and regional connectivity through the TRIP program. The Virginia Transit Equity and Modernization Studies being completed by DRPT and identifying ways that our transit providers can ensure better and cleaner access for all. Only days after the COVID-19 pandemic struck in March of 2020, DRPT brought to this body a plan for transit recovery and funding of $11 million in operating assistance to transit operators. That's why VTA was proud to award DRPT's Director Mitchell and Transit Chief DeBrule our Distinguished Public Agency Leadership Award in 2020. The J team has been good.
Just hiring people to
The fact that other accomplishments include the establishment of the Commonwealth Rail Fund, the Virginia Passenger Rail Authority, and the extension of passenger rail to Southwest Virginia, and a new track across the Potomac may be why Jennifer is the FRA's best new addition.
Kind of in her resume.
We applaud your good work here in Virginia, Jennifer, and we wish you Godspeed. And to Jen, we know that you will continue the work to advance public transportation, and we look forward to continuing our partnership to improve mobility for all in the Commonwealth. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And we had Rob Whitfield signed up for public comment as well.
Commissioners, and right. Thank you for all the effort. I'm Rob Whitfield with the Fairfax County Taxpayers Fund. And I got into transportation issues about 15 years ago because of the Dulles Rail project, and I opposed the tolls for that. But having said that, I am an advocate of projects that are cost effective and for which the public can all benefit. And listening to the conversations this morning, I realize there are many issues of which most of us don't, and the normal part of it don't have knowledge. So, unfortunately, we're in an environment where the financial situation for WMATA and VRE, there are lots of big question marks in the near future. I'm not smart enough to know what the solutions are. We have to be very careful in committing taxpayer capital projects if they're not going to pan out the way that they were planned 5 years ago. In particular, because of VRE, still, as I understand, down 85% in ridership. And 2/3 of the people who ride VRE are federal workers, most federal workers. So I don't know if a special task force is needed to address financial issues by DRPT, but something I've been asking at the main CTB meetings, I've been asking for some kind of oversight. In the case of WMATA, we obviously had Paul Wiedefeld leaving, and now last week it was announced that the Inspector General, Jeff Charrington, is being replaced, or is his contract is not renewed, and no public explanation was given. I've talked to Jeff Charrington maybe half a dozen times in the last 5 years, never gone into any details on some of the issues I've seen, but if you read the articles that were in various newspapers and magazines last week, there are a lot of issues. And I did actually on Sunday met with House Speaker, I'm sorry, I just blanked out on his name, from Woodstock, from
Todd Gilbert.
Thank you. And I expressed my concern on this to him when I met him. And I don't know what action is being taken. So
I guess I hope that I know that the Chef Miller has said that some of your meetings are going to be held away from Richmond this year. I don't know if that's been set, but clearly in Northern Virginia, because of the cost of the projects that we're involved in, we have to be sensitive to what schedule is going to be achieved with the Virginia Passenger Rail Authority plan. I know Steve Patar, one of the benefits, I've been coming down to Richmond for over 20 years. So along the way, I've met many of the people. And Steve tells me he's working on an updated, I don't know, ridership and revenue plan is the best way to describe it. I don't know what, I mean, obviously I know this is complex, but my concern is that we not jump into things. I guess it was NBTC a couple of months ago, they were talking about the different technologies for electric buses and trying to get some kind of uniformity between the different transit agencies. And so I realize this is technically challenging, but we've got to somehow build more public involvement in the process, because right now, I don't know, I know the lawyer, sorry, I forgot the name now, Tracy. There are very few people here from Northern Virginia, I would suspect, but I've made the effort. I almost got here on time today, but not quite, so I'll do better next time. So I'll be glad to help whatever process you come up with for dealing with that.
All right. Thank you very much. Is there anybody else here?
And best wishes, Steve.
Thank you. Is there anybody else here who didn't sign up that would like to make a comment? Okay, so with that, I know we're a little bit over and some of you have another meeting to go to. We're going to call this meeting adjourned.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Look forward to having you in DC.
Yes, yes.
Yeah, and it's across the hall.
Thank you.